Hello, everybody, and welcome to KV with Keaton. What a great guest we have coming on today. If you're wondering, we're at a different time here than our usual Sunday schedule because we're bringing on professional wrestling legend who has a very busy schedule. He's one of the most well-renowned coaches in professional wrestling right now. He's faced some of the biggest stars in the industry in WWE. He's wrestled for the likes of WWE, the NWF. He's wrestled for Ring of Honor and has coached some of the best wrestlers this world has to offer. Let's put your hands together and bring in none other than Brutal Bob Evans.
Hello, Mr. Keaton. How are you, my friend?
All good. Thanks very much for coming on.
Sure, the pleasure is mine.
Yeah, it's an honor having you on today, and thanks for taking some time out of your busy schedule as well.
Yeah, we're in the middle of a tour of Georgia right now, and I'm in Warner Robins, Georgia, on a stop here. A quick break, a day off before we finish up the tour in Georgia tomorrow, and then we fly home to Massachusetts on Sunday. So it's been a fun few days, but the road gets to you sometimes, but that's okay. And but it's been great. Been teaching. I've already done 2 seminars. We did a big wrestling event at a brewery in Augusta, Georgia, with a very, very rowdy crowd. It was a great time. And again, we finish in Saturday in Newton, Georgia, which is about 4 hours south. And yeah, it's been great.
Awesome, and it's incredible how long you've been doing this. So you just mentioned there you're just after a tour, and I believe you've been wrestling since 1991.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's Wikipedia says 1991. I had my first pro match in 1992. I did some backyard stuff in
Mm.
91, but yeah, 92 was the official start. So yeah, 34 years as of last month.
Yeah, so that's an awesome career and awesome long time of wrestling. So just tell me, what is your very first memory of professional wrestling? That's something that made you look at it and just think to yourself, "This is what I want to do."
Probably. I grew up as a young guy, and you're a pretty young guy right now yourself. But I grew up watching Hulk Hogan and Roddy Piper and the War to Settle the Score. I got involved in it probably very, very early 1984, and that was when all the MTV stuff was happening, and the Rock and Wrestling Connection and the connection with Mr. T next year in 1985. So that was really when I became a fan. In That's probably the earliest memories I have. A bunch of friends were talking about it in school, and when you're in middle school, 7th and 8th grade, that's kind of what the hot things are, the cool things people talk about. So yeah, it was a great time to be a wrestling fan. That's for sure. A great time to be a kid and growing up in that environment.
Awesome, yeah, that was a really good time, especially when Hulk Hogan was coming in with Mr. T. There was, I think, yeah, in that tag team match, that was one of the still talked about till this day. Had a big impact on professional wrestling. So was it the kind of larger than life characters that drew you to wrestling, or what was it?
Yeah, I think it was. I mean, I like sports. I was a big baseball fan and starting to get into, American football and basketball and things like that. It was, but I don't know. When you see wrestling, it's such a different thing, and it's. I didn't really like boxing. I thought boxing was kind of boring, but I did like wrestling because there was a lot more movement and a lot more stuff, and obviously all the promos and the interviews and the yelling and screaming and the people freaking out, stuff like that. That was interesting to me. I don't really know exactly what drew me to it because I didn't have. It wasn't, some people say, oh, I watched it with my granddad or I watched it with my mom and dad. We went to the matches. Like I didn't have any of that. I had no wrestling fans in my family. Um, they never even brought it up. I can't remember one time where they talked about professional wrestling before I started watching it. So it's in the beginning, my dad was kind of discouraging me to watch it. Oh, that stuff is all fake and phony. And, contrary to popular belief, we weren't all silly, delusional people back then. We kind of knew it was a show, but we just didn't care. Still don't care. So, my dad's a big fan now of mine. So there's no issues there. But, 34 years later, 35, well, that was before that. But yeah, he's, no, my parents are supportive of that. They don't want to see me get hurt, especially at my age, but at any age. But yeah, it was. I don't really know exactly what drew me to it, but I'm guessing that's probably the best answer, like the larger than life characters and stuff like that.
Absolutely. And even when you mention there, people saying, it's all fake. I don't think people understand that they would maybe sit there for 2 hours and watch a movie, and they're saying that professional wrestling is all fake. Why do you watch it? People don't understand that you sit there and watch entertainment. That's the whole point of
Right.
professional.
And I agree with you. And I think what's happened lately, probably in the last like 5 or 10 years, and you've seen it on the Joe Rogan podcast, you've seen it on most stuff. Like people don't even really talk about that anymore. It's not a thing. It's pro wrestling is a lot more respected as far as the physicality of it, because we've seen, I think a lot of documentaries have come out, a lot of a lot of stories, a lot of movies, a lot of people have written books about it. So people kind of understand that how physically violent it can be and how much of a toll it takes on you, and how it's it's a lot more real than people think. Plus a lot of people in MMA got involved in it, and they have a ton of almost to a person, every MMA person I've met has had tremendous respect for what we do, because they might do 2 or 3 fights a year. Maybe on a busy year, they might do 4 or 5. We do 50, 60, 70, 100, 150 matches. So it takes quite a toll on you.
Absolutely. And even when you mentioned earlier some of the MMA fighters, Ken Shamrock even stated himself that wrestling was harder than MMA, not because the punches were harder, but it's because he couldn't get back up and he couldn't get up and fight. He had to take them bumps he had to take them bumps for so long, working for different promotions. So that is probably harder on your body than MMA would be.
Sure. And just because you know how to fall doesn't mean the fall doesn't hurt. It might hurt differently. It might hurt a little less, but you're doing more of them too. So it adds up.
Yeah. And when you first started watching wrestling, was it the very first second you started watching it, or was it later down the line where you thought to yourself, this is what I want to do?
I'm sorry, you broke up a little bit there. The question was, when I first started wrestling, did I want to do it?
No. So when you first started watching wrestling, what was the point where you thought to yourself, this is what I want to do?
I think that came later, because I was always my parents were always like, you're going to go to college, you're going to go get a job. If you want to wrestle on the side, that's okay. But there was really the only place to go was Killer Kowalski's wrestling school. And that was like an hour and a half drive away. And back then that was like a million miles. And my parents didn't want me driving. Even when I got my driver's license in the beginning, when I was 16, 17, they didn't want me driving up there three days a week. And plus there was no money to pay for it. So what happened was I started my own little backyard deal, and we put it on public access TV, which is like free cable TV here for local stuff, community stuff. And I put a phone number, it was my home phone number, believe it or not. And I said, if somebody wants to wrestle with us, because we considered ourselves like a wrestling club, if somebody wants to wrestle with us, call us up and you can be a part of it. So I had one of the local kind of semi-pro at the time, pro wrestling companies. One of the guys called me, one of their representatives, one of the trainers there. And he said, hey, if you guys want to join us, we do this. We have a real wrestling ring. We do it in front of a crowd. We do pro wrestling style matches. We're still learning ourselves, but if you guys want to jump in and help us, if you want to come in and be a part of it, you can. And it was very reasonable to train there. It wasn't expensive. So I started there in New Bedford, Mass, about 20 minutes from my house. And that's kind of where I got my start. And I was there for a while, but that was later. And I was 19 when I started. And I probably would have at least tried to do amateur wrestling or high school wrestling, but we didn't have a program in my high school. So, I started doing pro wrestling at 19 and haven't stopped since. And, but if they hadn't made it affordable and they hadn't made it accessible to me, I wouldn't have had a way to do it.
Absolutely. And even when you started, there's a very similar story to that. There's a guy called Crusher Crossan who used to be my co-host on this podcast, and I'm actually wearing his t-shirt here in the way of wrestling. So he started up the first ever kids wrestling league, in Minnesota, and he got it on cable TV. just like you did. It was quite a similar story. They were untrained and they kind of learned themselves how to wrestle, and then they started working with Eddie Sharkey. So it's a really similar story.
Yeah, yeah, I'm sure there's a few stories like that. That's you find a way, right? You start doing something, and then people find you. So that's why I always tell people, like, and you're a good example of it. People that want to do a podcast or people that want to start in the wrestling business, just go do something to be a part of the wrestling business. Go volunteer at a show, go help out at a school. If you want to train. Um, go put yourself into the business, and the business will find you and give you more stuff to do. If you stand around and say, well, if I'm going to get discovered, eating at a restaurant, and somebody's going to tap me on the shoulder and say, hey kid, you could be a wrestler, that's not going to happen. You have to go to shows, you have to go to training, you have to make yourself available, and you have to go do these things. I was talking to somebody about it yesterday. They always talk about right time and right place, but you're not going to know that unless you're there at the right time in the right place, because there's going to be a lot of wrong time, right places, right time, wrong places. It's not always going to add up. But the thing is, if you don't get some repetitions and start doing the stuff, you're never going to be a part of this business. So that's why it's kudos to you for, at such a young age, starting not starting a podcast. You've been doing it for a while now, but doing a podcast and trying to figure out how you can add to the business. I think it's great. So they should take your example and jump in and be a part of the business.
Absolutely, and even when I started wrestling when I was 10, and started getting trained a bit more, and wrestled for the NWF Championship, and it was brought out of retirement. So I've had quite a lot of matches, but I think something that's helped me a lot, even getting over the crowd, was social media. Like right over here, people would watch my stuff over from Northern Ireland, and even the likes of Ben Bishop and Jack Vaughan, them two guys that they started through like out social media, and now they probably got a lot bigger pops, and they're getting their names out there just from social media. So a lot of them guys are just are becoming big because of social media. So getting out there and doing things is probably that's probably the biggest thing you need to do in wrestling.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I think Jack's a great example. Jack was again, I put a video out on it last week or 2 weeks ago. People can check it out. Facebook.com, Brutal Bob Evans, if you want, check it out there. But Jack was somebody who I thought was a pretty good hand in the ring. I saw him at some Ohio shows, and then he sat down with me in a seminar. And I'm always very honored when the veterans, the guys that have been around for 10, 15, 20 years, sit down with me and ask to pick my brain, because they've probably hit a spot where they can't really go any further, So I think the fact that he sat down with me, I think, is awesome. So he's like, yeah, I'm stuck in a rut. I'm kind of at this one area, and I can't really get past it. And I had noticed that he was really posting some really cool, like, Twitter lines on people. It was like one sentence, and it was like mic drop stuff. It was really good. And, I was like, hey, you should do, like, TikTok was just becoming kind of a big thing. This is a few years ago. And I said, hey, you should try doing that TikTok stuff. I don't know much about it, but I know, like, you're kind of this veteran kind of dogging the new guys. So why don't you go right into the new guys format and mess with them? And not only did he do it, he didn't do it. That's the only instruction I gave, right? He always gives me plenty of credit, and I appreciate that, because I did give him the idea. But I give people plenty of great ideas, and very few people run with them. So I'm not a genius. I just like to help people do more things and help people. If you're stuck in a rut and you're plateauing, then if I help try to get you out of the plateau, you should probably try that thing, even if it's not your thing. And he ended up running with it and doing fantastic with it, obviously. And I talked about it. I talked about the 3 people that are really killing it as far as indie guys on social media now. And there's more. There's other people too. But Jack Vaughn, obviously, we just talked about Jack. Richard Holiday, who's, was a very good wrestler out of Connecticut for 10 years. It wasn't like he was a bad wrestler, and he's a very good looking guy and has muscles. He's gotten himself in tremendous shape, but he needed a hook. So he found a hook with his, the finishing move and all that stuff, right? And signature move, excuse me. Sorry, Richard. And then Ben with the whole 6'12", and it really started with Ben making that silly grin on AEW and people making fun of him there, and he just kind of ran with it, and it kind of amped him up there, and he just kept with it. He's not afraid to make fun of himself, and he's not afraid to look bad. that's Matt Cardona did the same thing. Like Matt Cardona did some cool stuff. He did some funny stuff. He did stuff where he looked bad. He did the whole thing. The you know who the last person in the world you think that would win the hardcore championship in GCW is Matt Cardona, and he won, and he made a huge. It was a huge deal. Like if you can do something to get attention for yourself on social media, and not bad attention, good attention. I do it my way, and my way is a slower way where I give advice and I try to be wise and I try to have you guys learn from my mistakes, because it's not that I'm the smartest guy in the world. It's just that I've been around a long time, and I make these mistakes. So, hey, avoid this if you can. Really try to avoid this if you can. I see mistakes being made, and I want to try to correct them. So that's kind of where I am, and people seem to like it. They really get into it. So there's ways you can do it in a positive way, in a good way. It can be cool moves that you do. It can be cool spots that you can do. I talked to a promoter who does a bunch of interesting stuff with different ways of presentation. And I said, why isn't there social media about this? And he's like, oh man, I should have done that. And I go, yeah, that's a lost opportunity. It's not the end of the world, but it's a lost opportunity. Capture the stuff on social media, show it, because it, like Gary Vee says, it's interest media, and if it interests people, they're going to pay attention to it. And I think it's the best way to reach a lot of people with a human connection. So, and the AI crap is going to go on, and I use AI, and we all do, and we've been using AI for years. Every computer you use is AI, so stop thinking you don't use AI. But the point is, don't have it make you lazy. Have it make you better, a better version of you. Have it enhance you. And the human experience, I think, is going to be more valuable than ever. So make who you are as a human being and what makes you unique, enhance that with all the technology you have around you, and then present it to people and say, this is how I can help the world. This is how I can serve humanity. Do that stuff. So I feel like those guys are really nailing it. And I'm real proud of them. I'm friendly with all three of them. So it's kind of cool to see them do their thing,
Yeah, absolutely. And something that I'm doing as well, to try to help out indie wrestling is, obviously you know this yourself, is when you get into the ring, what you see is you see the ring, but you don't see the hours of traveling, the hours of setting up everything,
Oh, yeah.
venues, stuff like that. So I run my own series called Indie Wrestling Uncut, focusing on the grind of independent wrestling. This episode was about reinventing yourself after being in WWE and going to the Indies. It was with Killer Cross. But that's one of the things I try to do on social media.
Yep. Yeah,
Um,
that's great. And then there's a perfect example too, Kevin Killer Cross. A guy who really upped his brand on social media and started getting some buzz around him. And WWE didn't see the value. And in my opinion, I think he's good enough to be a top guy. I have for many years. I saw him recently. He was at a Comic-Con late last year, and I had forgotten how big he was. And it's so funny because I said, I've forgotten how tall you were. And he's like, I've forgotten how tall you were too. He's like an inch taller than I am. He's like 6'3", 6'4", and I'm like 6'2", 6'3". So it was really funny. I've known Scarlett since the Ring of Honor days, so it was great to see her too. But it's such a good package. And I think he's such a wise guy. He's done so many things in wrestling that I think it was a loss for it was a big loss for WWE, in my opinion. Like it was, especially since he had gotten some buzz. And right now, WWE could use some buzz. I mean, you're hearing a lot of criticism. I don't watch them as closely as I should, but you hear a lot of criticisms of them being kind of boring and safe and
repetitive. So repetitive.
Same old thing.
Yeah.
So if we have a guy who can kind of mix things up and maybe say something he shouldn't say, maybe he's dangerous. Maybe he's going to say something. I mean, that's what Punk did. That's what Brian Pillman did. That's what Piper used to do. It's MJF does it to a degree. And these are people that are using social media to help enhance your product. And then you don't use them. It's weird. I think that Cross and, Scarlett could be big. I think they could be big again. And I think they'll get another chance. I do. So.
Yeah, absolutely. WWE's wasted so many great talents over the years. But back to when you started training, you said there, you started training and it sort of helped you start training, like the sort of, what was the word, like catered you start training. So what was the very first bump you took, or like some people say, like when you first get into the ring and when you take bumps, it kind of decides who you are as a wrestler, if you can do it or you can't. So how did it feel after taking that very first bump?
I took, yeah, I mean, I had taken a few bumps in backyard, and I didn't really care for them because we didn't really have much of a ring. It was like a platform with like some pads over it, and it wasn't much. So, I think the first thing almost everybody does if they've never been in a real wrestling ring before is they take a bump and they're like, "Oh, I thought it was going to be kind of soft and like a trampoline." Now, I will admit that the rings that I grew up on and the rings you grew up on are probably very different. We basically had a lot of converted boxing rings with maybe a spring underneath, maybe, and a little bit of give. Um, the rings now are quite a bit better,
Hmm.
but yeah, that was a bit of a shock to take one. But I wasn't heartbroken by learning the ins and outs of wrestling. I was a wrestling observer reader, so I knew some of the terms, which I don't know if it helped me or hurt me. But it was one of those things where I think you either decide, like you said, you either decide to do it or you decide not to do it. And I think, yeah, that is kind of a microcosm of the whole thing. Like when you first fall down, man, or you first hit the ropes, I know of like at least half a dozen people who have broken their ribs hitting the ropes because they don't realize that the ropes are harder than they think. Um,
Yeah,
so, and there were a couple of people that broke them on ropes, not just cable ropes. So it's, when you start realizing that, oh my God, this is going to be a lot of work and there's going to be some pain involved. It's not just, somebody does a stunner to me in the backyard at the barbecue and we all have some laughs, or does our RKO to me in the swimming pool and we all, joke around. This is a lot more serious. So, yeah, it was, no, it was a bit of a jolt physically and mentally, but I was pretty determined to do it. I mean, it wasn't just a passion. It was like, I really want to do this, and I knew I wasn't good at it. Nothing really came naturally to me. So it took me a little longer. And really the biggest things I was afraid of was the flips. Because I failed even up to high school. I was scared to death to do forward rolls and things like that. Like that stuff scared me. And then of course you got to do all that stuff. And it turned out where I could do, eventually I did moonsaults. I did Frankensteiners off the top rope. Like I did all the, pretty much all the crazy bumps. I stopped there. That was about as spectacular as it got, superplexes, things like that. So, but in the beginning, so that was actually one of my things that I was happiest about, proud of myself about, is that I conquered all these childhood and teenage fears of rolling and flipping over and things like that. So that was cool. I remember my first, like, not my first specifically the day or anything, but I remember backdrops and Rick, the big body slam off the top rope that Ric Flair used to take. Like we did those, and that was like a thing I really conquered. I was like, all right, I did something. I feel like I conquered something today. So yeah, it was
yeah.
quite a jolt.
So after you taking your first bump and you got into training better, what point were you ready to have your first match?
I actually kind of got rushed into action because we had a few people leaving the roster, and there wasn't a big roster to begin with anyway. So I had my first uh, battle royal probably, oh my goodness, probably a month into training, which was crazy. That was really fast back then. And then I had my first match probably 2 or 3 weeks after that. So probably 6 or 7 or 8 weeks, less than 2 months though, for my first match. And then 2 weeks later, me and another guy won the tag belts, and not because we were supposed to lose, but both of the tag team champions were leaving for different reasons. So we ended up winning the tag belts. And of course, in your second match, when you win the tag belts, it's not you think you did something, as a rookie. So it was an ego boost, but it was an ego boost into arrogance, and we thought we were, hot stuff, but we were. And I think we held them for a couple of months and then dropped them back, and we weren't, we weren't ready for that stuff. But yeah, probably about, so battle royal, I think it was about 4 weeks, and then an actual match was 2 months. Yeah, too fast. I wouldn't do it that fast these days.
Yeah, but when you first go into a match, I suppose a battle royal is a lot easier because for a trainee getting into the ring, all you're really doing is you're not really doing as much as you would in a normal match. So
Right.
it is sort of a way for a trainee to kind of get in the ring and just step in and out of the ring. But when you first won them tag team titles, correct me if I'm wrong, but did you not form the team? Wasn't it the Brutal Bridge or something?
Oh yeah, yeah. I forget. I don't even know if we had a name back then. So it was a long time before
The Brutal
any kind
Brigade.
of any kind of name or anything. Yeah. So I think I wasn't even Brutal Bob Evans at the time. I started doing almost like an Undertaker cowboy thing called the Peacekeeper, which was terrible. Um, and because I had red hair and a beard, and it kind of looked a little bit like Undertaker, a miniature version of Undertaker, 6 inches shorter and not in shape. But uh, in the beginning, you're just kind of doing the best you can to just kind of mimic people, or just do the best you can, and just kind of you want to get in the ring. You're not sure of who you are as a wrestler. You're not even sure who you are as a person at 19. So I just I kind of just did what I could. I didn't become Brutal Bob Evans till later, probably like a year later. So, um, but yeah, that was those were those. It was certainly a learning experience. But yeah, those matches are horrible, but it's okay. I was young and dumb.
Yeah, and a lot of people say even when you go into your matches, that's still your training. Especially maybe in the AWA days, you didn't really get training as such. It was sort of like you just went into a match and that was your training. So, what did you sort of learn when you went into the matches? What did you pick up that you realized you were doing wrong? Maybe a year later.
Really wasn't doing anything wrong. It was just experience, and I didn't know how to put matches together. We didn't. Nobody there really know how to put a match together in the beginning. It was just very, let's just wrestle and do headlocks and shoot each other off the ropes, but there really wasn't a lot of like good guy and bad guy stuff. Nobody really knew how to do heat. Nobody really knew how to make the babyface look good. It really wasn't um, that environment, because it was very, again, this is 1992. It was very, archaic than compared to how it is now, where there's a lot more explanation to things. So a year later, about 2 years later, I met a guy named Bruiser Costa, who was one of Killer Kowalski's original students from way back. And he kind of started teaching me how to become a good heel, like a good bad guy, and how to put heat on the baby face. And he kind of trained me actually how to put matches together. And, it was really more repetition, and then him kind of, and a lot of the lessons I learned, he gave me those lessons early, and they didn't sink in because I still thought I knew better. And then later on, I give him a lot more credit now than I did back then, because, he kind of handed me a lot of lessons that really, helped make me who I am today to a degree. So I'm grateful to him. And then a few years later, my original tag team, well, not my original tag team partner, but one of my original tag team partners, Steve Bradley, went, started wrestling as Superbad Steve Bradley, and started doing bigger shows where Jim Cornette was there, Kevin Kelly was there, Dr. Tom Pritchard, and Jim he thought I was a nice guy, but I wasn't ready for any kind of WWF thing. But he scouted Steve for WWF, and he helped get him signed. And then what Steve would do is Steve would go and train with Dory Funk or Dr. Tom and these guys, and then he would come back and he would kind of teach us what WWF was looking for. And I was trained in a very old school way. And at the time, even though it was Dory Funk and Dr. Tom, it was still an elevated form of training from a newer school guy, because Steve Bradley was he was younger than me. He was very athletic. He could do a lot of flips and things like that. So to have kind of that double, he'd come back and he'd be like, yeah, this is what we learned at the Dory Funk dojo this week. This is what we learned, this kind of stuff. So, do with it what you want, but this is the stuff we learned. And we'd go through it, and we just, we'd go through like the training and the drills and the whatever. It was cool. It was like kind of like very enhanced like workouts. And, we got it secondhand, but it was still very, very effective as far as getting us ready for more of the late 90s and the newer TV product and the newer wrestling product. So, and like I said, I feel like I was probably in 26, 27, but I wrestled like I was 40. And, Steve Bradley would always say the same thing. He's like, old school's great, but you got to pick up the pace. You got to wrestle a little faster. You got to put more you got to put more pop behind your work, more zip. And I was like, okay. And then when I did, it did make a huge difference. So I unfortunately he's not with us anymore. God rest his soul. But Steve Bradley was definitely very instrumental in that to kind of get me ready for whatever the next step was. So.
Yeah, learning from them guys like Steve Bradley and some of the other guys that you learned from. What's one thing that you teach now to your students that they would have taught you back in the day that you still carry on to this day?
Probably the fact that like you need to believe what you're doing. They called it believe in your own BS. So you got to commit to the role. But not commit just to the role, but you got to commit to the match. What's the story of the match? What are we trying to get accomplished today? What's the money of the match? You hear at different times. What's the meat of the match? You hear different ways, people saying it different ways. You can't just go out there and have a match because you feel like having a match. What are we trying to get accomplished today? And that was taught to me about at that time by a couple different people. And once you kind of have that in mind, your match will be better almost automatically because you're not just wrestling for yourself. And also, like, you don't wrestle for yourself anyway. You wrestle for the people. You wrestle for the audience. You don't wrestle to pop the boys or the girls. You don't wrestle to entertain yourself. You wrestle for the people, the crowd. And if the crowd's not buying what you're selling, then you got to sell them something else. And that doesn't mean completely change who you are. But if there's things that are working, double down on those things. And if there's things that don't work, throw them out and do something else. So I think that was the biggest thing is it's not just about you doing moves and people watching you like you're some kind of interpretive dance guy. It's about you having matches that connect with the people and making them care. And that doesn't mean you just yell, shut up and you suck and now they boo you, because they won't. That's just kind of back and forth. That's not creating heat. That's creating a good shine for the babyface to make the babyface look like a killer. It's good hope spots that actually make people hopeful that the babyface is going to come back, and then a great finish. Either way, either you win with heat or you lose, and the babyface goes crazy. The crowd goes crazy because the babyface won. So it's but you have to figure out what's the money of the match. What are we trying to do here? And there's always a basic story, right? If it was me and you, it would be old and young. That's an easy one. If I'm the babyface and you're the heel, that's a different vibe. If I'm the heel and you're the babyface, that's a different vibe. But in any of those stories, it's somebody trying to win and somebody trying not to lose. So that's where that story comes in. So again, those lessons I started to put together back then are: what are we trying to get accomplished? What story are we trying to tell? What's the finish look like? And can we execute the plan? So that was it, because that was really the start of kind of not streaming, but doing stuff more of like maybe for video release, or we're going to put this together, we're going to edit it, and we're going to put it on video. Now we're kind of going into the early 2000s, but that's really like when it started getting a little bit more like TV production wise.
Yeah, and even when that's a good point. Like trying to make a great story in your matches, because a lot of people don't do that anymore. When we see a lot of the guys, even in AEW, you just see a lot of flips and 450s, and that is cool. I like that stuff, but there needs to be story with it, and that's something I didn't understand when I started. Maybe when I had my first match, I didn't understand. You need to go slow in the ring. I'm thinking to myself, why should I go slow? But now I sort of understand it a bit more. That it's sort of like you need to give the fans. You can't just have flips going about the place. Yes, it looks cool, but you need something to build up to that. And it took me a while to understand that, but I understand it a lot more now. So, yeah, so it is sort of hard to understand, but you do finally get there.
What's your favorite movie? Do you have a favorite movie?
Probably The Goonies.
What is it?
The Goonies,
The
probably.
Goonies. Perfect. Okay, so I'm so old. I saw The Goonies in the movie theater twice. But I saw The Goonies when I was a little younger than you. So The Goonies is a good movie. It starts slow, it builds up to going faster, and then it slows down again. Then there's more action. then it slows down again, and then there's a big conclusion, right? There's always, and you could, nonstop action for the whole family. Well, it's not technically nonstop action. In a 2-hour movie, there's probably 27 minutes of actual action, but they put them in the right places and they give you a rest so you appreciate the action and it stands out more. So that's why people are telling you to slow down. They're not telling you to go slow because they're jealous of you because the young kid is going faster than the old people. It's, my new friend, Mr. Keaton, I want to see him. If he's going to hit the big move off the top, I know how much of a toll that takes on his body. So I want him to hit it when it makes the most sense and it gets the most reaction. With that, you have to build credibility. And talking about Mr. Tony Khan and AEW, I talked to one of their coaches there, one of the agents there, and he said, people pick on Tony Khan for liking the guys who do the big moves. But you know what Tony Khan likes better? The guys that do the big moves with a story. So if you do big moves with a story, then you'll be able to serve Tony Khan, you'll be able to serve WWE, you'll be able to serve whatever company you're in. So story is very important. And it's not, we don't have to have some big dramatic story in the first match, in a first match or a second match in a 6-minute segment where we're going to do about 5 minutes of actual wrestling. But the story should still be, I don't like this person, I like this person better, and they're both trying to win, and both working hard and struggling for the same goal. And they're going to try to get in each other's way to block each other to do that. So that could be the story. It doesn't have to be, this guy cheated on my girlfriend and I hate him, or this guy set my house on fire, or this guy stole my car, or he beat up all my friends. It doesn't have to be that serious. But there does have to be at least something I can see when I go to a show, that these two guys are really, they may not hate each other, but they don't like each other right now because they're competing with each other. So you at least have to show the competition aspect.
Yeah, well, I've created some at the start of my matches. I didn't really have any story. I loved in technical wrestling, the sort of chain wrestling like Johnny Saint and people like that,
Mm-hmm.
and I would sort of copy a lot of their moves. But after that, I've sort of been able to add a lot of story into my match. Like in my last match there, but done a lot of simple stuff. But I think it got the biggest reaction I've ever got before, just because of that I went slowly in the match and I created a story with a handshake and kicking me before he does the handshake, stuff like that. Simple things like that. They got a lot of reaction.
Yeah, I mean that's great. And by the way, you're young and you're still new at wrestling. Not as new as you were back then, but you're still new to wrestling now. You're allowed to make those mistakes. But true education is learning the lesson and then applying the lesson. So, you and I could give you all the greatest advice in the world. You could give me all the greatest advice in the world. If I go, yeah, thank you, and shake your hand, and you say, yeah, thank you, and shake your hand, and we don't do anything with it, what's the point? Now it's just, we're just entertaining each other and we're just kind of patting each other on the back and having a good day, and nothing really has changed. True education and stepping out of ignorance is taking in the information. You don't necessarily have to do every single piece of it, but saying, all right, these are the things I didn't do as well as I could. And you don't beat the shit out of yourself for it. You don't beat yourself up. You just go, hey, I could have done that better. How can I do this better next time? And you either get the advice, or maybe you've already learned the lesson and you already know what to do. Well, this worked really well when he kicked me before we shook hands, so let's do that again. But this other thing we did where he yelled at me and nobody really understood it because it was too inside wrestling and it was too specific. He probably should have just said, I hate you, and slapped me in the face. But he said, when you did this 3 weeks ago at the last show, and it was too much, right? There was a moment like that actually at a show I was at recently where the guy should have just said, hey, come with me and be my tag team partner. And he made up this big, long promo that was way too long. I said, the people who are watching aren't following the stories that closely. So you have to that's another thing too that we struggle with, because most of the wrestling, and I know all the wrestling you grew up on, was TV wrestling.
Yeah.
And TV wrestling is different than live event wrestling. Live event wrestling is for the house. It's for the people around you. It's for the audience. TV wrestling, they basically tell you to ignore the live audience, their background, their laugh track, their noise, and wrestle for the bigger audience at home. Well, the bigger audience we have in a live event is the live event audience. Even if we do a little streaming or sell it afterwards or whatever, or YouTube or whatnot, it's still not the live event audience. That's usually the bigger audience. And that's the ones that are going to buy your merch. Those are the ones that you're going to shake hands with and hopefully provide a great customer experience so they come back, right? So we can't do that if we just, again, like you said, go too fast, don't tell a story. We have to slow down. We have to realize that they're not as big a wrestling fans as we are. They're not going to appreciate every intricate hold. God bless Johnny Saint, but if we start doing Johnny Saint matches out there, it's just going to look like we're rolling around holding each other's hands. They don't know what it is. So we have to work every hold like it means something, and we have to slow it down. We can do some of that stuff because I don't have a problem doing some of that stuff. But you have to remember, all the people that were watching World of Sport were educated on the World of Sport wrestling. They were there for, they knew exactly what it was. So it wasn't hard for them to understand all the technique and the the ins and outs of that style. But if you try to do that at a bar show where everybody's drinking, or the fundraiser for the local football team trying to get new jerseys, right, new sweaters, whatever, like that's not going to work because they're not that involved in wrestling. They don't know that much about wrestling. They're not going to. Again, it's going to look like we're just all rolling around holding each other's hands. It's not going to look like anything. So we have to kind of, and I'm from the northeast part of the United States, where we grew up on heavyweight boxing matches and fights, right? Even when you go into Canada, our side of Canada, it's the same thing. Like, it's a lot of fighting. Very big hockey contingent, very big boxing, lots of wrestling. They want to see fights. They want to see people get punched in the face. So if you do a lot of technical wrestling, they'll boo you out of the building. Not necessarily at the shows we're at, but they still, the people want to see a fight. Let's go to the fights. They want to see that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I get what you mean. But so after, when you mentioned they're wrestling in front of bigger crowds, or even just doing proper fights, I suppose, correct me if I'm wrong, but you did work for WWF for a while, didn't you?
Yes. Yeah, quite a few times.
So when you work for WWF and you sort of learned how to go over to a lot of the bigger guys, I believe that you got to face King Kong Bundy, next to King Kong Bundy, the Undertaker, even the Adam Bomb. I think that was maybe in his debut or earlier your debut. So what was that like? What was that kind of experience like?
Well, King Kong Bundy, I wrestled at an indie show, and he was easily the funniest guy I've ever been in a locker room with. That's why he did stand-up comedy later. But I grew up watching King Kong Bundy when I was watching Hulk Hogan and all those guys when I was your age. So that was a big thrill for me. And then I said, I wonder how he fakes that big splash. He doesn't fake the big splash. He just jumps on you and lands on you. And then, no, I never wrestled the Undertaker. I did a thing where I dressed up as one of Triple H's friends who dressed up as fake cops to beat up the Undertaker and Kane. So we did that. And then, but the Atom Bomb was the first time I got to wrestle in front of a live audience, and that was the 2 or 3 weeks. It was taped 2 or 3 weeks before my 21st birthday, and it aired on the weekend of my 21st birthday. So that was cool. That was a fun little birthday present. And no, it was good. It was he was a nice guy, still is, and that was my first taste of being. I met the Macho Man, which was cool as hell, and never got a chance to meet him again. And he's long past, so that was a big thrill for me. It was kind of cool meeting all like a lot of the stars from back in the day, and then it was in the Lowell Memorial Auditorium, which is famous for Shawn Michaels losing his smile. That's where he lost his smile. And I wrestled there several times when Ring of Honor was in the building years later. So it was, so that was cool. So it was, but yeah, that was, and then I was probably booked about 20 times. So that was 1993 with the Atom Bomb match. And then I didn't get booked again because I didn't try very hard to get booked again until the late 90s. And I started getting kind of on that wheel because they did a lot of stuff in the Northeast. So, because it was cheaper and it was really popular, and why bring all that technical crew all over the place when you can bring it locally? So I ended up getting booked quite a bit over the next couple of years, and I got a few dark matches. I got a few TV matches: Gangrel, Dean Malenko, Perry Saturn, Joey Abs, who was part of the Mean Street Posse, and it was a good time. And I wrestled Aaron Stevens in his first match back when he was Aaron Stevens, and he turned into Damian Sandow yet, and now he's back to Aaron Stevens again. So I wrestled him in his first WWF match. But Aaron was a New England guy, and I knew him from he worked and he wrestled and trained near me a lot. We had never wrestled each other, so but it was a fun time. And they were looking at him and not looking at me, which was just fine with me. So, and he ended up getting signed shortly thereafter. So, had nothing to do with me. He was just a big, good-looking guy, just like he is now.
And now that you're in the WWF, how was it that you first got called up? How did that happen?
Well, we really back then you were more booked as like enhancement talent. So I never had a contract with them. I was more of an enhancement talent with them. So believe it or not, we did something that you would never do now. Please don't do this. But back in the day, it was a little more, it wasn't as structured. And there weren't as many layers of, red tape to get through. So me and a buddy of mine, we just drove to New York, Utica, New York, and which is about 3 hours from where we live. And we brought our bags and we walked in and we were looking to get a match. And back then you didn't have a great chance of doing that, but you might have an outside chance of doing that. So we talked to Tony Gurria, who was one of the producers / agents at the time. And he said, "Oh, I'm sorry, boys, there's nothing for you today, but let me take your name and number and I'll consider you for something in the future." And I said, "Well, I know you guys are in Massachusetts in a few weeks, so we're from there and we can, go." And he wrote all our names down and he said, "Thanks." And we expected never to hear from him again. And he actually called us like a week or two later and booked us for Lowell. So my buddy, Johnny Royal, who didn't get a chance to wrestle, but he was there. And then I got a chance to wrestle Atom Bomb. So, and then I tried a couple times after that to get back on, and I did fine. So it wasn't anything about that. I tried a couple times and then gave up. I probably should have kept going and tried a little harder because, back then the money was good, still good, but so then I kind of just kicked around the indies and did that. I didn't really go back to WWF till, again, like I said, 6 years later. So,
and then being backstage, seeing some of your heroes from who you saw. Did you meet Vince McMahon? Did you get much conversations with Vince, or was there any other people any other interesting stories from backstage at WWF?
No, not that. I met Vince McMahon later when I was doing TV later on. I met him quite a few times because, and I met Shane, where Shane actually recognized me by face. He didn't know my name, but he recognized me by face. There's a big restaurant chain in the United States called the Bob Evans Restaurant. So that always helped me because people would think, they'd think of me when they thought of the restaurant. So that helped. And I met Stephanie and I met Linda. I met I think all the McMahons. So I think I actually met Marissa one time, Shane's wife. So, but I didn't really have any meaningful conversations with him because I really wasn't trying to get signed. I mean, I had 20 chances to really go out and get signed. And in the back of my head, I think I was trying to a little bit, but I think I wanted the money more than I wanted the work and the schedule, because I just couldn't see myself wrestling that schedule because it just was a lot, so I always wanted to wrestle, but and wrestle in the WWF was a goal. But as soon as I did that, I didn't need to do it again. And I ended up doing it, 5-6 more times, which is great. But I didn't need to win the belt. I didn't need to be the big guy in the main event of the pay-per-view. I didn't want to do any of that. I just kind of wanted to, hey, this is cool. I did this, because it was about the only professional sport I was going to be good enough at to make it. So, but yeah, as far as talking to Vince McMahon, aside from introducing myself and saying nice to meet you, that was about it. So, and he was very, very friendly, very cordial. They all were. I mean, I actually had a few quick conversations with Shane because Shane was a little bit more, he wanted to be one of the boys. He was a little more casual. And obviously, like, I thought Stephanie was beautiful, still is, but back then I really did. And then Linda was very nice too, but it was, there was I didn't really mix in, it was just hello and friendly and shake hands and move on, because there's 150 people back there, not just wrestlers, but production crew, and everybody's doing something. They're trying to get the show going. So you didn't really have too much time to chit chat with those people because they were busy doing other things.
And when you worked for WWF, as you can tell, or you were enhancement talent, so you put a lot of guys over. So and Casey Thompson as well, he was another enhancement talent.
Yeah,
he does a podcast with Kevin Kelly. But he was enhancement talent. He was a really good bumper. I've seen a lot of his bumps. He was really, really good at taking bumps.
Yeah.
So with you kind of guys who were enhancement talent, did you ever have a problem with putting any guys over maybe at the start when you were wrestling?
No, I mean, not really. No, I mean, I haven't really. I think for a while in the middle of my career, I did. Um, Not huge deal, but I was like, why am I always losing? Like, it was actually kind of in the beginning of my career. But I was a bad guy.
Mm.
And again, one of my big mentors early on, Bruiser Costa, Jeff Costa, he said, Evans, you don't get it. Like, you're the bad guy. You lose every night. Like, but it's a great job because if you can get over as a heel and stay over as a heel, when you lose, they'll be cheering for you to lose again tomorrow. So you'll still have a job. You know, you're not going to win the belt and you're not going to go over a lot of guys, but you're going to have a job for life. And I didn't understand that at the time, you know, because my ego was too fragile at the time to understand it. I understand that a lot better now. And for the last 15 years, I can't think of a time when I said, oh, I got to lose. I'm mad about it. I can't think of one time. I'll just lose, you know, even if it's for a guy who really, it means a lot for him to go over and he's kind of being a mark and oh, I want to win. Okay. I'll just laugh about it. It's not really a big deal. I mean, if it's a big deal to him, then he should win because it's going to mean more to him than it is to me. So, and I'm not saying that I don't take the business seriously and I'm not the business at hand seriously. I'm just saying that it's not a big deal. So,
Yeah, I think I agree with you. I think that's always like the last thing that should be on your mind. If the winner of the match. I've had 3 matches and I've lost every one of them, and not one time I've ever complained about it. Like there's a guy who was coming into a match. It was his first ever match, and he wanted me to win, but I just thought it's his first ever time having a match. He has the size of a wrestler, so I just thought it'd be better for him to win. But not once I've ever had a problem with that. I think people get too much egos. There's too much egos backstage worrying about that kind of thing.
yeah. Yeah, and usually the people that have those kind of egos don't really go anywhere. They don't really make a lot of money. They don't make a big splash in the business. It's the people that can kind of work within a teamwork and still maintain their stardom and you know, get over. But getting over doesn't mean going over all the time. So that's also something that people need to realize, that you know, you can have an awesome match and lose and still make a great impression. So, you know, you want to win, obviously, you know, if it was a competitive thing, but you got to realize this isn't a competitive thing. It's competitive performance wise. And by the way, that's another thing out of your hands. You can't control that most of the time.
Hmm.
So, but you can control having an awesome match and making the other guy look fantastic. And if you make the other guy fantastic, people will figure out who did the work, you know, without you having to shout it out and pound your chest. Like, people will figure out, especially the people that pay you. Triple H has been carrying, you know, in his career, he carried people for years. You know, Tony Khan certainly has plenty of people around him. And I don't know if Tony Khan understands how that works, but I think he tries to, you know, I think he logically knows. So again, you know, the winning and losing is important, but it's important. It's important to do it. It's really about how you win and lose, not if you win and lose. You know, are you winning or losing in the right way at the right time in the right place to the right person? And if you're not, okay, how can I have the best match I can have, even if I don't agree with it? Well, you know, the coach calls the plays and you just execute the plays. And if it's, you know, Jim Cornette, when he was running Ring of Honor, would say, if it doesn't work, it's my fault. So, but if you don't execute the plan, then it's your fault if it doesn't work. But if you execute the plan to the best of your ability, how I tell you, and it doesn't work, that's on me. So, and I always appreciated that. So, yeah, don't get too worried about winning and losing. So,
I'm just going to bring in some fan interactions here and we'll get back to that part. But I'm just going to bring in some of our comments here. Wrestling for Life 2026 asks, who's your Mount Rushmore of indie wrestling? It's a great question.
oh wow, indie wrestling, geez. My goodness. Wow. I've never even thought of that. That's a great question. Indie wrestling. Let's see. Probably Tracy Smothers would be one.
Mm.
Wow, you're really putting me through it today. Let's see. That's a good one. Because so many people have made such a big strides in the last few years too. So, wow, that's good. That's good. Chase Stevens, I think he's a good one. Derek Neal, and probably Homicide.
Homicide, yeah, great name.
Even though I think Homicide is a fantastic national and international wrestler too, and a great guy and a leader. So I feel like, as far as independent wrestling, I don't want to, and I know he's proud of his independent wrestling career, but it's also kind of, I don't want to discount his national and international stuff too. So.
Yeah, and I think that was for me. I would probably say Mick Quackenbush should be on the list, just because what he done with indie wrestling, like with Shikara Pro Wrestling. That
Yep.
was kind of like the NXT. Every single wrestler, most of the wrestlers who were on that made it big. Like Amazing Red, a really great name.
Yep. Those are good names.
Quackenbush made things absolutely incredible, even with Reckless Youth and all. When they started off in the start, Quackenbush just done amazing things for wrestling, and even the people that he got on, like El Generico, who turned into Zombie Jane. I know he probably didn't train a lot of them guys, but he did get a lot of them guys on a show, and I think it was probably one of the best things with indie wrestling. I think he's a really, really big name who should probably be on it.
Yeah, those are good names too. This could be debated for a while.
Yeah, and then Unique Spots says, tell us a story about the pranks you guys put it on the road, please, Bob.
See, that was never really my thing, so I'm not a good guy to. I'm not a good guy to do that. If I did any stuff, it was always like small stuff at shows. Like if a guy was standing there, and the song would change. Just kind of the song would change on the playlist to entertain the fans. I said, "There's your music, go!" And I'd shove them out the curtain, and nobody would be ready to see them. Like stuff like that, little stuff, harmless stuff. I never really did any stuff with women or messing with the people's bags or anything like that. So I'm like the worst guy to talk about this, because we would just do like silly stuff, but nothing too crazy. Nothing they can use against me in a court of law.
So then you kind of reinvented your character as well, the Brutal character. So at what point did you become Brutal Bob Evans, and who is Brutal Bob Evans?
I actually used that in the backyard, and then and then for about a year I did the Peacekeeper thing, and then I went back to Brutal Bob Evans. I always liked the alliterative way it sounded, like Bulldog Bob Brown, stuff like that. But I wanted to I didn't want to be Bulldog. I wanted to be brutal. So I just kind of used it. Brutal Bob Evans, kind of just lines up. It's alliterative. It's catchy to a degree, And then I just kept it. That was it. I didn't really, I kept it as long as I could. A couple people used a couple different things. So, are you there? You hear me? Hello.
Sorry. Oh, I'm back.
Okay, good. There we go.
Lost you there for a second. Can you hear me? Yeah.
I can hear you just fine. I could hear you the whole time, actually.
So you reinvented yourself as a character, and then became Brutal Bob Evans. You really became a heel at that point. You were a very good heel. So what was the worst thing you done to get over as a heel?
I think early on they had me tear up a kid's stuffed animal and like throw it at him, and the kid was trained to cry, and a lot of people thought that was real. Like, I was not, the wrestling matches were real, but I did that on purpose, even though they told me to do it. So that worked real well. I don't know, I mean, nothing, probably unprotected chair shots and stuff like that, stuff I wouldn't do now. Swearing into the mic, things like that, just stuff I wouldn't do now. Cheap shit, stuff I just wouldn't do now to get heat,
When you talk about cheap stuff, like cheap heat, to get stuff, what's your opinion? Because you have a lot of different opinions on wrestling. So people who maybe get, just for example, about the collective thing, but if someone maybe got a stapler for hardcore wrestling and it was to get heat, what do you think about that? Do you think that they should go to the traditional ways of getting heat, or what way do you what do you think?
Well, I mean, I think there's a time and a place for everything, but I think it has to be whatever you do with stuff like that. It's like a move. It has to be a big deal. Don't just do it and throw it away and use it in every other show. So, plus I always thought a staple gun was weird because a staple gun is like a heavy instrument. Just hit the person over the head with it. Like, don't staple their head. Just punch them in the face with it. It's a big, heavy 2 or 3 pound thing. Just bash them in the head. But, yeah, I think with any of that stuff, if you're going to use an implement or you're going to use some kind of weapon, it's got to be a big deal, and it's got to be made a big deal out of, and we have to talk about it for the next 2 or 3 shows, and we have to talk about what a horrible thing it was, because that's how you get it over. If you just kind of talk like it was just last night's match and, you know, stuff like this happens all the time, I think it's kind of, you know, it doesn't really go. I think, yeah, traditional ways are good. I think you can do a lot more traditionally than you think you can and get over just as well. Because I think a lot of people don't want to see that stuff. I really do. I think that turns off as many people as people like it. And people can like it. That's fine. I have no issues with that. But I think it turns off a lot of people too. So, I would, yeah, I tend to not like doing that stuff. I don't really think it's not my cup of tea for sure. Again, if other people want to try it, that's fine. I think it'll get a reaction, but it's not just a reaction. It's the aftermath and the consequences with that reaction. Are 20 people going to leave and never come back? Did you just lose ticket buyers? Usually you don't gain ticket buyers when you do stuff like that. So, and is that what this is going to be now? You know, because people don't like that stuff. So, I remember a guy bladed himself, and my wife and kids hadn't really seen that at a show, and they were just there to help at my merch table. And, you know, my son and my daughter were kind of like horrified by it, you know, like they didn't like that at all. So you got, and that was probably about 5 or 6 years ago, but that really made me kind of change my opinion on stuff too. Like, is that something where, you know, do we have to do that stuff? Because think of the families, you know, think of the looks on the kids' faces. Is that something, because I know they never went, they never went, and they got it for free, but they never wanted to go back to that place again. And I wonder if that's, you know, how many people that turned off that were ticket buying customers. That company closed down shortly thereafter. So maybe there's your answer right there.
Yeah, and I also sort of think that if you are doing that kind of thing, yes, it's okay to do it, but there needs to be a reason to do it. But
Right.
if it's especially if it's a grudge match, yeah, that could be cool than a hardcore match for to build up the grudge. If someone hits someone with a chair, so then they have maybe bring the chair to the ring of the mark of their head or something like that. But I also think it should be a one-off thing. I don't think it should be done every single week, because if it's done every single week, people are going to be expecting it every time, and no one could do that to their bodies every time. But as a fan, or anyone else that's a fan, you are going to expect that every time. If you're seeing that over and over again, you're going to expect people to do it on different shows, and they don't understand the consequences it has on their bodies.
Exactly. And it's going to be another, it's got to be a special occasion, right? So, and that's the thing. So I'll give you a few more minutes, because I got to actually have another Zoom call coming up. So
Yeah, no problem.
yeah. So if you have another big question, I'll be happy to answer, and then we can pretty much wrap up at that point. So.
Yep. So that's okay. It was kind of coming to the end anyway. So
Fantastic.
So I just wanted to ask you before we left though. So when you went on the Ring of Honor,
Yes.
you work with the likes of Cheeseburger.
Yep.
That was quite a good match, and you I think you debuted as a mentor and a manager for McBennett. So
Yep.
tell me about your Ring of Honor days, and just now we kind of come to the end. Just tell me about your whole time in Ring of Honor.
Yeah, for sure. The whole Ring of Honor thing happened when Jim Cornette kind of took over some of the talent, the booking stuff with Delirious, and Kevin Kelly was coming in to do the announcing. Well, Kevin Kelly is my best friend in wrestling, so he said, "Hey man, like, you should try to give this a shot. This is your opportunity." And I went and I paid for the first tryout camp, and I got my job out of it. And Jim Cornette called me, and he's like, I'm going to give you a job, but it's probably not the job you're expecting. I want you to manage Mike Bennett. And I said, okay, because Mike Bennett's your guy in real life, and we want you to be a grizzled wrestler living his life vicariously through the younger, good-looking young guy who's a good athlete, and you're going to hitch your wagon to his star and ride him to fame. And I said, that's fine. That's all good. When I started in the Ring of Honor, I did that, and I wasn't a manager. So I had to kind of learn how to be a manager. And I did okay. It wasn't my true job, but I did it for over a year. In fact, almost a year and a half before I got a chance to actually wrestle in Ring of Honor. So, and that took a lot of trial and error and a lot of things. And, Maria started managing Mike, so we didn't need two people managing them. So then they decided to turn me babyface. So I turned babyface and teamed with Cheeseburger for a couple of years. And then I turned back heel
cool.
on Cheeseburger. And we got a lot of mileage out of like 4 TV segments all year, where it seemed like we were feuding with each other all over the place. And then we finally had a match at Final Battle, and it was a YouTube exclusive match. In other words, they didn't have room for us in the pay-per-view, which really disappointed me. But when I remember when the ring graphic came up, the place went crazy. Like it was one of the matches on the card. So I was really proud of that. We built that pretty well, I thought. So I just saw Brandel recently at a show, Burger. So we, had the match, and then started teaming with Tim Hughes for a couple more years in Ring of Honor, did some enhancement stuff, had some fun, and then it was time to move on. And really there was no dramatic firing or quitting or contracts running out. It wasn't really anything like that. It was just kind of, they weren't booking us anymore, and it was time to kind of move on and do different things. So we just started wrestling around the indies a lot. And now Tim Hughes, my ex-tag team partner, not ex-tag team partner, we still team every once in a while, but he's got a big fancy job now. So he doesn't wrestle as much as he used to. And my big fancy job is out here doing coaching and mentoring and consulting and a little bit of wrestling on the side. So, but as far as Ring of Honor goes, to wrap that up, it was a wonderful 8 years. I don't think anyone, including me, expected me to last 8 years in that company. Some people didn't think I'd last 8 minutes. So, but I met some really great friends who I'm friends to this day. I helped people. I was helped by people. And, there were a few heartbreaks. There were a few times where I got mad and frustrated. But there was a lot of good times too. And I wouldn't trade that time for anything. And it taught me a ton of stuff. And I'm very grateful for that time. So, and I'm very grateful for the time you gave me today.
Yeah, and now we're kind of coming to the end, but I want to thank you very much for coming on. But as of now, you're a wrestling coach, and you even some of the guys I know have said that they were coached by you, like Steve Weiner, great guy. I got to know him.
Yep.
Yeah, then there was so you became a very well known coach, and even Iron Week as well, lasted in the ring for so long. I don't know how anyone could do that, but that's awesome. So I've got one last question for you. As me, for an aspiring wrestler, what's the best piece of advice you could give to a young trainee wrestler?
It's kind of what we touched on earlier in the interview. It's go to shows, go help out, go be a part of the business. If you're a young guy like you and they don't have room for you on a show, you can always buy a referee shirt, and you can buy a black polo shirt and be security. You can have a referee shirt, black pair of pants, black shoes, black sneakers are fine. And you can referee, you can be a security person, you can take tickets, you can help put up posters, you can help hand out flyers, whatever it is. You can help set up the ring, you can help break down the ring. You can help by getting people on your podcast and promoting the local scene. So there's plenty of stuff that you can do. Now, for somebody that doesn't have a podcast, they can still do all that other stuff. And, get in the car, get on the train, however you get to shows, and go become a part of this business. The business will not find you if you don't find it first. The business will not discover you if you don't discover it first. You have to go out and you have to be a part of this business. And if you sit there and say, I want to get discovered, and I'm just waiting for my break, nobody's going to give you a break until you go and break yourself. So, and again, be very, you don't have to be a genius at social media, but I would assume everybody is pretty much on social media, and start talking about your journey as a wrestling student, as someone doing podcast, you specifically, as a young person doing this. You're younger than most people in this game, and you've already accomplished so much. Just talk about it and, be that young guy. Oh, you're the young guy that does this. You're the young guy that does this. You're the teen that does this. Yeah, you are. There are a lot of people in this business. I mean, I can point to Izzy immediately, who used to be the little girl at ringside, hugging Bailey, and now she's wrestling,
Yeah.
having matches. But she's also a college student, and she's very good on social media. And she's a young woman now. I mean, she's got to be 20, 21 now, but there's someone who you've seen her journey from a little girl to a grown woman. It's pretty fun and interesting to see. So again, you guys are a lot more social media plugged in than I am. So I want you to beat me. I mean, I post 20 times a day. So maybe you guys can post 21 times a day, or you can post one time a day, really focused with a really cool thing or a really cool video, or I don't know, a young guy trying to make it in wrestling at your age is pretty interesting to me,
Yeah.
and document that journey. Even if it's just for you when you're old and broken down and you just want to look back on the old times, there's nothing wrong with that too. So, we have so many great ways to document a time in our lives now. And back then, when I started, it was a couple of pictures and a program or something in a magazine and maybe a VHS tape. Now there's so much more that you can do to document your journey. So document your journey and then show what you're comfortable showing. You don't have to show parts of your life you don't want to show. Don't lie, be honest, and if you have a tough day at the office, say I had a tough day at the office, and we'll go and get them again. That's one of the things that people find inspirational and aspirational, is people that get knocked down and they get up again.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
So thanks so much for coming on. It's been a very educational one for me as well as an aspiring wrestler. But yeah, thanks so much for coming on. It's been a pleasure having you on.
Of course, my friend. Thank you so much for having me, and good luck on your journey. And I hope to meet you soon.
Hopefully. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. So what an awesome podcast we had there with legendary Brutal Bob Evans, legendary pro wrestling coach, also member of Ring of Honor. Some amazing stories there from Bob. So that was awesome. And as for the next kayfabe with Keaton, I don't have a graphic for it because it's pretty far in the future. As we've just done a podcast here today on Friday, which is going to cover for our Sunday show. So so for this episode, that was pretty good. But for the next episode, that will be on. I'll need to double check here, but I think give me a minute. So for the next kayfabe with Keaton, I'm bringing on the legendary Irish Mickey Doyle on Sunday the 22nd. Yeah, Sunday the 22nd of March. To hear his stories from WWF and being a journeyman. Stories from back in the old days of WWF, wrestling with Andre the Giant, people like that. So it'll be a very good episode. And stay tuned for the future because we'll have some very, very big guests coming on in the future. So stay tuned for that. So thanks very much for everybody for watching, and hopefully we'll see you on the next one for the 22nd of March with Irish Mickey Doyle.